Well, Pope Francis has declared that there's no hell. And I mean no disrespect to our Catholic friends out there, but that would come as useful information to probably a billion people throughout history. You read like the history of the Middle Ages, so much of what they do, so much of the motivation for the behaviors of these people, Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary and all the rest of it, back and forth is, to avoid hellfire and damnation. It would have been useful information for them. Probably would have been useful information for a bunch of back seats of American cars during the last 30 or 40 years too as well. But in any event, this Pope is an interesting fellow. He's very progressive Pope. He's the first Pope to come from the Western Hemisphere. He's also the first Pope to come from the Southern Hemisphere. And what's especially strange and ironic about him saying there's no such thing as hell is, since he comes from Argentina, he doesn't have very, very far to go to find a pretty good example of hell, which is Venezuela. I mean, people have been starving to death there. They're eating the animals out of the zoos. If you want to see a starving tiger, it's not a pretty sight. Just Google Venezuela zoo tiger and you'll see what this socialism and this left-wing activism has done to Venezuela. And by the way, starving to death is the most horrible form of death that there is. It's the most painful, longest lasting. It's just terrible. And to be starving to death during the siege of Leningrad, let's say, 1 million people died in the Second World War during the siege of Leningrad, or even if you're trapped in the mountain passes like the Donner Party and you're starving to death because you can't do anything about it. You're stuck there. To be starving to death in Venezuela, where the children now are killing each other with machetes to see who can get the best garbage. When you're starving to death, sitting on the largest oil reserves in the world, that's a special kind of hell, Your Holiness. It is a special kind of hell. And John Paul II, who you seem so very different from, understood that. He grew up in Poland. He understood what this socialism does to people. And for you to say there's no hell, I'm sure you're referring to the fire and brimstone. Nobody really knows whether that's there or not. But if you look at what history does know, it shows you that there are plenty of places that get very, very close to actual living hell. And pretty much all of them are a result of these kind of totalitarian policies and these utopian ideas. Ironic, isn't it? These utopian ideas that we can create heaven on earth through this socialist miracle, and we've tried it a bunch, and all we seem to be able to do is create hell on earth.